Hi everyone, it's Miss Price.
And Miss Niebling.
And today we're going to talk about analyzing figurative language. Up to this point, you've been able to explain the meaning of figurative language.
That is a really important step. To be able to explain what figurative language actually means is necessary because it proves you understand the definition of figurative language and what figurative language means. However, we also need to be able to go deeper than just a simple, basic explanation. We need to be able to analyze on a deeper level.
To analyze means that we're going to study something, we're going to look at it closely, we're going to break it apart into little pieces and study those little pieces.
Then once we've analyzed those pieces closely, then we're able to look at the full meaning of figurative language and think like a writer instead of a reader.
Right, so at this point, let's review real quickly what we've already been able to accomplish.
First, you were able to show that you knew the definitions of each type of figurative language. That's what you were asked to do on level 1.
And on level 2, you were able to show us that you could identify examples of figurative language that you were given.
In level 2.5, you were able to show your knowledge of the definitions of figurative language because you used them in your explanations of what figurative language actually meant.
So now level 3 is all about analysis.
Your goal is to be able to analyze why and how the writer chose to use figurative language in the text examples that we're going to give you.
And analyze how figurative language contributes to the meaning of the text. Now what we're going to do is we're going to look at the difference between explanation and analysis so that we can understand how to analyze figurative language.
So when you were explaining figurative language, you were able to take the definition of the type of figurative language that you already knew, then add in the information from the example, and ultimately put into words and explain what the example actually meant. Now that is a crucial skill. You need to be able to continue to know how to do that and to do it well. Explanation means that you are thinking more like a reader. You are seeking to understand what the writer was trying to say, and you stopped there. With analysis, however, you're not thinking like a reader.
Now you're going to make the switch over to a writer. And the really cool thing about this one is you're thinking, what is a writer doing and why is the writer doing what they're doing? What's their intent? What is their motivation behind choosing the words they chose?
Remember that writers, whether they're writing poems or songs or stories, they have a choice. What kind of word am I going to use? So now you're trying to think about, okay, they could have said it in a very simple, plain way. But instead, they chose to speak figuratively or write figuratively in their story. So what made them do that? What impact were they trying to have on their readers?
Right, as well as what impact they're having on their text. Because we need to not only just think about why they chose the word, but they chose those words to have impact. And what is that impact?
So we need to include that information in an analysis of figurative language, showing that we've thought like a writer and we've thought about the reasons behind their word choice.
Right. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at a couple of examples. Our first one is from Katy Perry's song Roar.
She sings, "'Cause I am a champion and you're going to hear me roar. Louder, louder than a lion."
Now, the first part, if we think about how would we explain this, you would first decide, okay, this is a simile. And I know it's a simile because she's saying louder than a lion. She's using a comparison word, than, to compare the two things. She's comparing herself with a lion because a lion is loud and so is her voice.
So if all we asked you to do was explain the simile, that's what you would write. However, we want you to be able to analyze Katy Perry's simile in this song.
So an analysis might look something like this. She chose to use a simile, louder than a lion, because she wanted to emphasize how her voice is more powerful and louder than even a lion, which is known as the powerful king of the jungle. Comparing herself to a lion makes her audience imagine a lion roaring when they hear her words, which makes her point about her voice even stronger.
So this analysis included some ideas behind Katy Perry's choice to use a simile. We didn't just say, okay, well, she was comparing herself to a lion. Instead, we thought about, why did she use a lion? What's so great about a lion? And of course, how did this word choice impact her audience? Well, we were all imagining a lion roaring, which made her point even stronger than it was before.
Absolutely, because I think the impact is all about saying Lions are listened to, and with my words, you're going to listen to me too.
So here's another example. This time it's a poem by the poet Jack Perletsky, and he wrote, "I've got an incredible headache."
My head's filled with horrible noises. There's a man mashing melons inside.
So if all I was asked to do was explain what this figurative language means, well, here's what I might write. I would write, the poet used alliteration in a man mashing melons inside to show that repetition of a throbbing headache when the sound is being repeated.
So that's pretty simple. It's just a simple explanation of definition and information that you were given. But now we want to analyze it. We want to look at Jack's motivation and how it impacts the reader.
So once again, he had a choice. Why did he choose to use man mashing melons? Well, when he chose that repetition of that alliteration, he wanted to mimic the feeling of a pounding headache. And so when you hear it's almost like you can feel your temples hurting, just like a really bad headache feels. So the feeling you get of repeating that sound makes the reader actually feel and imagine the headache in the words that the poet used.
Yeah, and this is a great example where alliteration is very powerful, it's purposeful, and it's really powerful way of emphasizing a point.
So now that we have looked at some different examples of analyzing figurative language, we just want to remind you about the ultimate goal.
I can analyze why and how the writer chose to use figurative language in the example, and how figurative language contributes to the meaning of the text.
So a good tip to remember about mastering this skill is to think about the intent or the motivation of the writer. Why did he or she decide to use the figurative language in the first place? What was the impact they were wanting to have on their reader? When you're able to put that into words, then you're able to take the tiny little pieces of the writing, break it down, and look to see how the figurative language impacted the text.
And remember, we're not asking you just to explain the figurative language anymore. You've mastered that. We're asking you to go much deeper and think about the intent and motivation and the impact.
So you're going to be doing some more practicing on your own to make sure that you feel comfortable analyzing at this level.
Enjoy!